schools becoming a way of life in the United States of America. That can't be. It's time that this Congress put kids over guns. That's what House Democrats want to do with the fierce urgency of now. Extreme MAGA Republicans should bring the bipartisan universal criminal background check legislation to the floor, and should also bring to the floor an assault weapons ban so we can have a debate out and open in front of the American people as to whether weapons of war have any place in a civilized society. House Democrats believe that weapons of war, which are not used to hunt deer, but are used to hunt human beings and slaughter innocent children, do not belong in our communities across this country. Republicans have a different view. Then air that out on the House floor in front of the American people. We're confident in our position. Stop hiding your position, and let's debate this issue of gun safety in front of the American people. Instead, what extreme MAGA Republicans are doing is bringing their signature piece of legislation, H.R. 1, to the House floor that puts polluters over people. It will blow up the deficit even further in order to subsidize big oil, which is already making record profits, pollute our environment, undermine clean water, clean air, and clean energy, and exacerbate, make worse the climate crisis, which Democrats were able to responsibly address in the previous Congress. You can't ask for a clearer contrast between House Democrats, kids over guns, and extreme MAGA Republicans, polluters over people. Questions?
Leader Jeffries, what did you make of what Congressman Bowman did and said last night?
I haven't spoken to Congressman Bowman. I've only seen some brief news clips about the situation. I'm going to refrain from commenting about what may or may not have taken place until I talk to him. But I do understand that passions are running high on the issue. Our children are being slaughtered in the streets of America. No other developed country in the world has this problem. And we should be able to tackle it. There are more than 400 million guns circulating throughout the United States of America. And law enforcement has no idea where most of those guns are. Many of them fall into the hands of criminals or individuals unfit to carry weapons of war, and as a result, carnage occurs. We need to do something about this problem. And so passions may be running high here in the Congress. Passions are definitively running high throughout the United States of America. And at the end of the day, the framers of the Constitution said that the House should be the institution that reflects the passions of the people. And if in fact that's the case, Congress should act on common sense gun safety reform.
Have you considered a discharge position? Have you prepared one to get this on the floor?
We're in conversation with all of the stakeholders to figure out the best way to proceed. At this moment, what should happen is that the extreme MAGA Republicans should put common sense gun safety legislation on the floor for an up or down vote. The children of America deserve no less.
Mr. President, thank you. Good morning. You talked about the energy bill here. I know that there's at least 2 Democrats, and I've been told as high as 6, who might vote for this. I mean, obviously, if you had unanimity on your side, you might be able to kill this, but that doesn't seem to be the case. There must be some merit that those other Democrats see in this piece of legislation despite your fervent opposition.
We'll see what ultimately happens in terms of the House floor. And every member who either votes for or against a bill that, in my view, puts polluters over people will articulate their perspective to the constituents that they represent back home.
Leader Jeffries, for the second time, the White House has reversed its position on a Republican disapproval after House Democrats dutifully voted against it. Do you trust the White House? What is your communication with them, and what are you telling members on this upcoming D.C. police accountability resolution?
Well, I think with respect to statements of administrative policy, there are different levels of expressions of opposition in terms of whether they disagree, strongly disagree, in some cases affirmatively indicate that they are going to veto the legislation. And to the extent that the White House has indicated that they are going to veto legislation, the White House has kept its word. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the most important marker of communication.
Leader Jeffries.
Leader Jeffries, you have an open dialogue with Speaker McCarthy. What have your conversations been like when it comes to the gun issue?
We haven't had a conversation in the last day or two about gun safety reform measures, but we will, and we will soon.
Leader Jeffries, just to follow up on that, has there been any willingness among Republicans? Have you had any conversations with anyone in Republican leadership about moving forward on anything when it comes to gun safety?
Well, House Democrats were able to find a path forward in the last Congress and pass meaningful gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years. That is progress, and it was bipartisan to some degree in the House and in the Senate. And that's a foundation, in my view, that should be built upon. We were able to make gun trafficking and straw purchasing a federal crime for the first time in American history. That's progress. We were able to allocate approximately $500 million in grants that will be available for communities across the country to deal with the rising tide of mental illness and the public safety implications. That's progress. We were able to allocate $250 million in grant support for community-based violence intervention initiatives all across the country. That's progress, and there were other parts of the gun safety bill in the last Congress done in a bipartisan way that lay a foundation. It is my hope to find a way forward to deal with a clear and present danger in America, which is the gun violence epidemic.
Going off of Heather's question, how are you actually trying to reassure a lot of your most vulnerable members who may have voted differently if the White House or Biden had said, I'm not going to veto this? We have heard that there are concerns, frustrations about that lack of transparency. These are your majority makers. The NRTC obviously already even putting out ads saying, they voted this way against crime, et cetera, et cetera. How are you reassuring them that you're getting communications from the White House?
Well, no one has to date raised a concern to me about the national emergency or the public emergency dynamic, and there had been some communication about that early on with respect to the legislation. In terms of what ultimately will occur moving forward, particularly around the common sense District of Columbia police reform measures, it's my hope and expectation that the White House will be crystal clear well in advance of that legislation hitting the floor as to their perspective. Go back to this idea.
Will you make a formal request from the White House for that, or are you just putting that in the public domain? Will you have conversations with the White House about making it crystal clear what their position is going to be on this crime?
Yeah, there are ongoing conversations to that effect, led in part by the Congressional Black Caucus, and I assume that there will be continuing conversations, as there regularly are, between the whip operation and the White House well in advance of the D.C. police reform bill coming to the House floor.
You say you need to do something on gun reform. If you couldn't do an assault weapons ban and you couldn't do some type of a universal background check, would enhancing red flag laws be something as opposed to nothing? What would be something if you felt like you couldn't get the bigger items?
Well, we should take a look at the items that were in the House-passed bill on gun safety in the last Congress and see what didn't make it in to the ultimate legislation agreed upon by the United States Senate. And there are a variety of items that fall into that category, including red flag, extreme risk protection orders that can help identify individuals who are potentially on the verge of doing something harmful to the American people while possessing weapons at the same time. Universal criminal background check legislation has the support of more than 90% of the American people. The overwhelming majority of Republicans support it throughout the country. A majority of NRA members support universal criminal background check legislation. And so why are House Republicans, extreme MAGA Republicans, standing in the way? That's the question that all of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle should answer. Day after day after day, until Congress acts to stop the carnage, stop the killing, stop the slaughter of children and innocent Americans.
Foreign Affairs Chair McCall has said that he wants to do a repeal and replace of the 2002 AUMF. Do you agree with that sentiment? Are you open to that?
Well, top Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Greg Meeks, is going to take the lead in that area, so I'll defer to him in terms of what is the right approach to take working with the Senate and the administration. Go back to this side.
When do you think it would be appropriate to move forward with the discharge position regarding gun safety legislation?
Well, we haven't made any decisions one way or the other with respect to a particular legislative approach, but we are going to continue to make it clear that Congress must act. Extreme MAGA Republicans should either join House Democrats in confronting the gun violence epidemic in America or get out of the way. It's that simple. The American people are demanding action. The children of this country are demanding action. Our classrooms have become killing fields. Is that acceptable in America? Is that how we want to raise our children? No, we should be putting kids over guns and act with the fierce urgency of now. And my Republican colleagues need to step forward or step out of the way. Last question.
On HR 1, the Senate's not going to take it up most likely, but there are some bipartisan provisions like permitting that's been discussed between Democrats and Republicans. There's been some discussion among Republicans about including permitting in some must-pass legislation like debt ceiling or government funding. Is that an appropriate place to put it, and is that something that you would be willing to entertain later this year?
Well, there are a variety of different conversations going on the House Democratic side of the aisle around permitting reform and trying to figure out how to facilitate clean energy projects moving forward, emerging out of the tremendous opportunities that we have connected to the Inflation Reduction Act. Progressive Caucus has a task force and an effort that is underway. There are new Dems, such as Scott Peters, involved in an effort. It's my expectation that all of us as a family, House Democrats, will come together upon our return and start to figure out where can we find the common ground in order to both affirm our values in addressing the climate crisis, but facilitating the growth and development of clean energy projects throughout America. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a good follow-up.